Oh. Feeling better, everyone? I forgot to say, but I just enjoy the people taking photos. All the slides will be available. I've got a QR code for the slides and everything else. That's the good news, yeah. And I've got like a Miro board, which I'll put like code links and all the other stuff, and that'll be kept open. So all the stuff we talked about and stuff, it'll all be on there. Plus these video streams and stuff. So if you want to go back over anything. I do find that quite funny that they've got a 404 lab. You'd never turn up, would you? You'd be like, I joke about it, but yeah, lab not found. Well, it's funny. So my house, which I grew up in, was number 13, but because of superstition, it was 50. So they literally, they do it on most roads and stuff. But yeah, and I did it. I was at a conference in Orlando, I think, for last year, and went to the hotel. And because I travel so much, the first thing I do is take a photo of the door, and they'd allocated me 404. So I always thought it was funny, posted it on Facebook or whatever, moved hotels, got into my other one, took a photo, went out, had a few drinks, got drinks. I was like, went back to my phone. I was like, no, that was the last room, 404. I can't remember. I must have not took a picture of this new one. And I realized that actually put me in 404 again in another hotel. So I not really registered the idea that it was 404. And I literally spent ages wandering around the hotel trying to find my room. I was like, so I literally didn't find my room, which is partially worrying. I know. And it literally, with my own, the evidence was, it was the correct photo as well. So, so anyway, hopefully, I say this afternoon, we've got 2 and a bit hours of fun. Hopefully you've enjoyed a bit of this morning. Oh, that's good. The 8 beers and 4 Irish Guinnesses or whatever I had last night are finally getting out of my system, I think, eventually. So yeah, so I think I said earlier on, it's like, I don't like to use the word false starts, but about a year ago, Dan, he's the guy on the right-hand side, he's the CIO of Keysight. I was just talking to Philippa about this, is that we actually launched a platform built on GPT, right? So everyone was getting excited last March. Everyone was talking about GPT, and we were doing 3 things. One use case was, in essence, a prompt engineering tool, which in essence, you uploaded a script, like a test script, and it would then generate the code out of it. In our case, it was our proprietary language. It's called SenseTalk. Language has been going for about 25 years. The second one, with our little Eggy, was also like Clippy, was this kind of conversational AI thing built on Power virtual agents, which also uses ChatGPT, so that you could talk to it, ask it questions. And then finally, we created this thing called ADA, which was our autonomous design automation, which literally was in essence Copilot for automation engineers, right? So we launched this, got all excited, went to Gartner, made a load of noise about it, and then we realized probably wasn't a good idea as quickly as it could have been. And that's why what was previously hidden around here is, GPT it was kind of what everyone goes for first. And then they realized that actually the consistency of results, I said about the 700 page requirements, is that it's not really fit for purpose. It's fine for asking it, where shall I go for the best gyros in Athens, but it's not going to know like a local will know, right? And that's the interesting thing about this, is there's only so far that this will take you if you're just using a large language model. You have to build everything on top of it to make it really useful. Yeah, exactly. He's a fine-tuned large language model. So that's what your new title is. So yeah, so this was kind of our first attempt, and like I said, a bit of a false start, because it kind of gave us too much confidence that it could generate automation. And like I said, the automation was garbage in, garbage out, right? Yeah, I could create a Selenium script, and would it launch a web page to open Amazon? Yeah, it definitely did. But that's it, because complex systems are complex by their nature. It's not every application is a web browser, and I kind of don't want to get upset with Selenium for a second, but there's complex systems, mainframe systems, service buses. There's so much more complexity. It's not just a nice browser. It is sometimes, but typically it isn't, right? So, this was a bit of a false start. And then I kind of say to people about kind of, Gen AI, and it's this kind of peak. So back in August 2023, and if you do, I'll share this report on the Miro board, but which we've got the rights for, so you can read it. It's quite good. But what you see here is at the absolute top of the hype cycle is AI augmented testing, right? So it doesn't get any higher on there. And I say that and then say to poor Dan North, behavior-driven development's right at the bottom now. But that doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means it's gone past the inflated expectation, and now it's just mainstream, right? People know Gherkin, they know BDD, TDD, ATDD. It's just another thing, right? But at the moment, it couldn't be more hotter than being in the prompt engineering space, generative AI or AI augmented testing, right? That's why last year was the year of the hype, shall we call it. And you've all seen this diagram in many different variants of things. I think some of the ones that I've got here I've just pulled from things. But you can see this kind of evolutional tree. And, ChatGPT obviously just exploded with popularity. But in actual fact, quite a lot of these other models had been around for quite a long time anyway, right? And the accuracy of them was already very good. And I think, I said to you kind of, well, what do we use under the hood? I would say that primarily we still use the mixture of experts 8 times 7 billion model because it's so good. And if you remember the mixture of experts, which I don't know if anyone could spot it, I knew someone could come in as soon as I closed that door. That's it. You can see Codex X there. Anyone seen Minstrel? But anyway, if anyone knows the story was they actually dropped it on, like everyone did, a seed on, what is it called now? What do they call it? Where people like peer-to-peer stuff. Torrent, yeah, they dropped a torrent on it. And then obviously they got a massive backlash, and backlash was they'd never put any safeguarding in it. So you literally typed into it, how do I make and I'm not going to say it because I'll get in trouble, but, or, X, Y, Z, and it would just tell you. So there was no restrictions to put in it, no safeguards. Slightly concerning. Thankfully, they've just had large investments. So the mixture of experts, 7 times 6 billion, is a little bit more politically correct, but it's also extremely well performant. I mean, how is it different than a public library where you could find this information somehow? Yeah, it's that's the thing. It's the same in essence, right? I think wherever it's trained from is all off a branch anyway, right? So there isn't that much evolutional change. I think really the only difference is that it's what they do after, the special sources that make the gyros so good, right? Like when I'm in Philly, we do the same thing. In the Philly steaks, everyone talks about where's the best place to get the Philly steaks. And the 2 original places are directly across the road from each other, right? Now, if you go to the one on the left, it is shiny, brand new, looks like it's had millions of dollars of investment, super slick, super great. Across the road, they've never cleaned the ovens. It's disgusting. Health rating D. Which one tastes the best? The dirty one, right? We know that. Part of it is because it's got 100 years of other people's grease that adds to that special flavor. And that's the same thing here, right? Yeah, umami. Yeah. That's the thing. And that's what you've got here, is that there is some little variants that do make a massive difference. Anyway, we saw this kind of explosion. It's interesting because people like Forrester and Gartner really started picking it up about 2019. I say this because it's quite interesting, because you suddenly see very similar, like DevOps. You see all these people with changing their job titles to like large language model engineer, and it's like says 7 years or 12 years of experience. You sat there going, really? What was you building on, right? Because there just weren't anything there. But we do the fun. So anyway, I said, where are all these slides? All the slides are there, which is on that bit.ly link. We test 24. Sounds like 24 hours a day, but it was 24. Thankfully, it's the year. So all the slides and tomorrow's presentation, just in case, like I said to Philippa, go and have a look, take the morning off. My slides for tomorrow are on there as well, so you should be able to pull everything from that area. Yeah, for the presentation and for and yeah, that QR should take you in there. So you pointed this out a few times, which is why you ended up with a cup. But obviously, the way that it works is through tokens. And obviously, how it tokenizes or it splits the words up is based on the sentence, which is why you have to be very, and we'll see some examples of this later. You have to think about how you structure the sentences to make it as concise as absolutely possible. Because the longer it is, the more tokens you're using. I'd say there's also a chance that it would be potentially, if you're not giving it more structure, you're probably taking away from it in a way. Now, I'm going to say that for 2 or 3 things. The first is what I refer to as the Tariq King method. Is he just does it in Markdown. He doesn't use what I would call traditional prompting. So, I've an example we're going to go through in a bit where you say, I'm a tester with 25 years experience. And for some reason, if you say, I'm an MIT professor, or I'm an MIT student, or I'm a whatever, if you describe, in essence, the persona behind it, you can sometimes get it to be more specific at the task which you're trying to get it to do. However, with Markdown, or the Tariq method, you can go past that by just literally giving it really good structure, giving it a mission statement at the top. I want you to create me a test automation script. The next bit is the test automation script must be written in JavaScript with WebDriver. I want the script to include my XPaths for this website. And as you go down, you're giving it, in essence, a specification in Markdown, and you're not using any of these descriptive words. You're literally bang, bang, bang all the way through. And you're saying the script must be at least 200 lines long. You must also add notation of what the script does. You must also add comments. It must be, here, and I want you to check this and then come back to me. And so you can get really specific with this. But we're going to see some of the results of that. But it's worth thinking about how many tokens you're going to be using, because you'll find, especially when you're running it on your laptop, it will make a difference.
One question.
Yep.
Very often we copy this as state trace of an error.
Yep.
Okay. Just to understand what does it mean, how we can solve it. Is it better, based on the description we gave, first to put the state trace and then ask a question, or first ask a question and then provide the state trace?
Fantastic question. So I would always recommend passing it first, and then saying, I'm going to pass you a stack trace, and I want you to remember it for later. Paste the stack trace in. Always on a carriage return break, stack trace information. Hit enter. It should come back with, I've got that, or I've acknowledged that. It should give you an acknowledgement. You'll find that GPT, when it wants to be lazy, which is what Jason always says, is that sometimes you can say, stop being lazy, because sometimes it'll give you the wrong response back. But typically, GPT 3.5, or 4 will take it and remember it. Anything you give it. Then you ask it, you'll say, but also use the label which you want to say. So you describe what you're pasting into it. So you say, I want you to remember the following stack trace. I'm going to ask you questions about it later. Next prompt, based on the stack trace I provided you, tell me what you see, what's interesting about it. So you're in essence giving it a label to the input you've got, because in a thread, you might have multiple sets of data. Yep.
So initially the statement, secondary the stack trace, and then
the question about
the actual question about the stack trace that you provided.
Yeah. Okay. Or whatever the label you want to refer to that first item. I'm going to give you a transcript of my Teams call. I'm going to ask you questions about it after. Based on my transcript, what tasks were allocated to me during my stand-up meeting? Boom. But you might then go, based on yesterday's transcript, what actions weren't completed in today? What actions are due today? And so part of it is you could be referring the same thing. And this is why I will open my GPT history for you in a second. But you'll see it's quite embarrassing looking through people's, it's like having cookies, right? You're kind of going, you sure you really asked that question? That was stupid, right? But I always start a new thread because it clears out the area. However, Jason, again, said you can tell it, forget everything I've previously told you in the thread and start afresh. And that will, in essence, clear the session down. So if you want to keep all the history of you asking it questions from previous ones, so you can copy and paste the prompts, you can tell it to forget everything that I've told it. And then it will come back and say, okay, what should I do next? So think about it, but think about the structure you want that to be, because everyone has their own organizational ways of dealing with things, right? We don't need Slido, not for that one. Bit more slightly relevant information. So I think this kind of links directly into what you're saying, right? Is if we'd have rewind a year ago when we were in Star West, there's me, Jason, Tariq, all the Dione, all the normal guys, and they were like, don't ask a prompt without the supporting information, right? It was literally kind of give it the stack trace, give it some history about the information, right? Give it something, and then the cool thing to do was have a vector database, right? And so if you download local GPT or private GPT, this is always Chroma, right? If you look at Chroma, what is it? It's SQLite, Python call, but in essence, it's just a flat file. It is just a flat file with text in it. And so if you think about your data, which is, let's just say, the ingredients of this Coca-Cola can, it's just stacked. It's like a NoSQL database, just dumped into a raw format. Therefore, when I'm asking it, based on giving the ingredients, what percentage sugar is, I don't even want to know, is in that Coca-Cola, it has to, in essence, take the string, this unformatted, unstructured piece of text, block text, and understand the correlation between, sugar, which I can't understand because it's in a different language, and it doesn't know the difference between the 300 mil and 100 mil because it's in a flat file. There's no CSV structure in it, so it has no idea. So it'll give me the number, which is probably wrong, on the 100 mil instead of the 330 mil. So straight away, whatever you've got in here, you need to know how you've structured it. So the first thing I say to it when I've got my vector database is create a table with the ingredients with 3 columns, one saying ingredient, one saying 100 mil, one saying 300 mil, and pull all the contents out of it. And so I'll look at it and go, it's in the wrong columns. And then I know that it knows that I know that it knows that I know, right? No one's going to don't ask that chain either. So you need to check that the data that you are is in a retrieval format before you ask it. The same thing with that, stack trace information is if you're dumping something that's unstructured, expect it to be unstructured data until you give it structure. Otherwise, you end up like this guy from the last conference looking at my stuff going, don't quite know what Jonathan wrote on the board, but said something. So this was the example we gave later about severity, right? You know, we talked about the 3 levels of severity, but Jura versus ADO versus ALM versus Quality Center versus Test Director versus Excel spreadsheet, you all have different ways of putting your severity, right? However, if you're feeding it in an export of all your defects from your favorite defect lifecycle tool, and you're asking it, what's the risk associated with releasing this product based on the open defects, you need to know that it knows what 1 to 3 is. 1 being high, 3 being low, or 3 being high, 1 being low. You know, part of it is you need to define that in your prompt, because otherwise it just sees 1, 2, 3, and it has no contextual understanding on what the information that it's fed into it. So you can think of all these use cases that potentially could be really valuable, what you do on a day-to-day basis. But again, there's always trouble in paradise when you're trying to work it out. Okay. We talked about this briefly, but I think it's also useful partially for GPT-4V. V for vision, O for, anyone, I don't know what O stands for, so I'm literally learning if you know what it is. What? Omni, there you go. We've all extended my knowledge now, we can just put that on the board. So vision, ChatGPT-4V included the lava map model, and on the next slide, or the slide after, I've got the QR for the one that you can go and grab on Hugging Face anyway, and I always use the same model because it's 1.6, really easy, and pretty much, like I said, you can ask it anything. Now, partially worrying, which Carl would have told me if he wasn't in supersymmetry or whatever it is that pigeons are actually better at reading X-rays than humans are, which kind of then worries me slightly of what pigeons are doing the rest of the time when they're not looking at MRI scans. But, you know, they've got much better vision, so they're able to identify things. And they did a study in a similar kind of way to, in essence, the way that, in essence, a large vision model would also be able to look at an X-ray and identify something that's an anomaly, an outcast, or something that shouldn't be on there, right? So this is pretty much the same kind of thing, is that it's understanding, and of course, the difference between this and a computer vision model is this is understanding and identifying key, in essence, words associated with the objects that it sees. So it gives it more contextual awareness of what it's actually trying to do. But again, like teeth or whatever it may be, it will detect them, and then you can ask it questions like, are these teeth, got a plaque on them or something? And it understands the relationship between teeth, plaque, and the state of the teeth that it's looking at, right? So again, these are language models linked with vision models that allow the identification of objects and their associated word that's associated with the object, if that makes any sense. And then one step further, we go into large action models, which are also called agentic models as well, which, if you've heard the term AI agents, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. That's really what they're trying to say a large action model is. They're otherwise known as large action models. But in essence, all it's saying is there's a lot more to a large action model, as in the same way as UiPath or Blue Prism or any other RPA tool has a lot more to it. This was really where LAM extends functionality beyond reasoning, inputs, outputs, passing outputs to other areas. So your question around general intelligence, this kind of multi-hop thinking is passing it to multiple loops into the fish to try and work out, is it an object I'm looking at? Is it code that I'm looking at? And how do I solve the problem? Anyway, nice and simple. This one is, hopefully we'll bring everything to life, and then we're into some actual hard stuff, I think. Oh, no, that's plain. So this is, that's OpenAI, what OpenAI is doing, which is slightly worrying. And this is Microsoft running, as you can see here, on Python, partially. This is visualization of thought. This is large action models. Now, what you've got here is exactly what I tried to describe, is that you've got, in essence, YOLO looking at all the objects that you can find on the screen. And you can see it's got automation ID, it's got where it is, what the object is, what it is. And in essence, it's passing that it found Spotify here. And then it's, once it works out, it's trying to open Spotify. It's open Spotify, to your point now, how does it know that it's where it is? It's then going, have I opened it? Yes, I have opened it. So it's like a preamble, post-amble checker to see if the action which it expected had the desired reaction over here. So that's how, like I said, bit of a spoiler for the future / spoiler for everything. That's how that will all work.
You also have to specify to check if it's open or not, or if it generates.
It automatically does that. But this is the interesting thing, is large action models aren't about checking. You know, obviously, we're not going to get into the infinite debate about checking versus testing. But in essence, they don't know checking. They only do actions and expect the desired action to actually be a success. So the fact that 4 times 4 is come out with a number, or it's sent an email and it's sent, has the person received it, or have you catched it on an SMTP local client? It doesn't know that. It doesn't know if the desired assertion happened. It only knows the action and the reaction from the system has worked. And I think this is where we kind of nearly come into the whole opportunity, is we start adding context to this. And like I said, the large action model is worrying because that is, you can probably see it a little bit when it was playing, but part of it is it's kind of identifying the type of task and how to do it. So if it can't find Word installed, it opens Notepad. If it can't find Notepad, it opens WordPad, if it exists anymore. Don't know. Do they kill it? I don't know. But if not, it goes and downloads OpenOffice and then installs it, right? You know, part of it is it's got to get to that point. So this is what we do, just as a kind of a fun area. And this is kind of what we've covered about today, is we, in essence, have a large language model router. We have fine-tuned large language models. We have code generation ones. We have a mixture of expert model. We run 2 of these simultaneously, one for translation 1 and one to translation 2. And then we keep on going around this process, and we have 2 models running in parallel, solving the problem. Each time the problem is being, in essence, solved, we validate it by looking at the screen. So think about it in a way of, I write a line of code, but then I've actually got to run the line of code and let the computer vision or the cognitive vision understand that that line of code is actually done. So new button comes up. Instead of the infinite one, login turns to log on. Only 1 letter distance. You know, my XPath would have caught it with a regular expression in the old days, but now it looks at it and goes, huh, I know because of my vision, my cognitive vision, that I'm looking at a login screen, which is some kind of SSO, and I know that the button's changed from login to log on. However, the user, based on the document that was specified, told me to log into the system. Is that a human problem? Well, actually, if I look at the Figma design, the button was login, but now it's log on. So is that a usability issue? Could be. So now it then writes a Jira request, writes a bug saying, oh, the spec said log in, it's now log on. Is that okay? It's not going to fail the test like it would do in our traditional automation script. It's going to say, someone needs to check that, and then continue with its thing. So it'll still proceed, but it's now learned it. Equally, because it's learned it, it's now stored it in its knowledge map. So next time, it doesn't make the same observation problem. But the same for me, it's brilliant because you would say it's self-healed, but it isn't self-healed because it was never there in the first place. It's stateless, right? And this is the problem. As soon as you express code to solve a problem, you suddenly limit yourself within the code landscape you've got. So what our guys have done, I feel like I've not drawn the wall for about 10 minutes. So I feel like they need to do it. And I get it wrong, but you might know this, Philippa, and I'll answer the question there is, it's not notebooks, is it? What's the term in Visual Studio for, it's not notebooks. Anyway, well, it's a type of, what it is in essence is it gives you the ability to have multiple languages running in the same script. So we, in essence, have, if you remember the Gherkin thing, we've got Markdown, which is someone saying, given I'm logged into the system, system logged in, and then it's got a then there, and then it's got a Selenium script here, written in JavaScript for some unknown reason. It runs through that. It logs into the system, and then it opens up, in our case, SenseTalk, but it opens up Playwright. I don't know why I'd want to go to Playwright in all fairness. Let's call it Python. It then does whatever it needs to do. Let's say it's rest assured here. So rest assured, C#, API call, drive screen. So it will run this entire flow through 6 or 7 different languages. And the thing what we realized is that by forcing it to do Python, we're limiting it. Forcing it to do Selenium, we're limiting it. Forcing it to just do Gherkin, we're limiting it. However, this is a hybrid of code, language, English, and Python and JavaScript. Why don't we just do the best of everything? So if you want to generate me a bit of code that logs in and it's in JavaScript, I don't care, right? So part of it is we've now got the flexibility where we can go between languages. So in a way, even though the fish is going around and trying to generate Python, so between you and everyone else watching, we always convert one transition stop will always go to Python, but Python might go to something else. And this is worrying if, for instance, which is depressing for me. So I did a book on UFT, which in essence is Visual Basic Script, 5.6. Did it go any higher than 5.6? I don't know. Anyway, so we go from UFT to Python, and then we go from Python to Selenium. Selenium JavaScript again, because for this particular variant. So we've changed language twice for no apparent reason, and you might say to me, well, why don't you just go from VBS to Selenium? Because I can tell you now, it's much more accurate going from VBS to Python to Selenium. And it seems like extra work, but it isn't. And that's the interesting thing, is code in, unify code out. And so what we can also then do, which is upsetting, because my sales are going to go down for my cookbook, is obviously if you take LeanFT, it could also be JavaScript. So you go JavaScript to Python, and then Python to JavaScript. So the question is there, if it's already in its native language, then there's no need to go into Python. So part of it is you choose when you need to do it and when you're not, but typically you have to somehow universally translate it at some point in time. And you could create a nice converter to convert Tricentis to eggplant. No, I'm only joking. Jupyter Notebooks is the Python stuff which you can pull out, which just uses your telnet connection. But it's like that. It's an extension which allows universal, because you can pass arrays and images and stuff through this, which is quite cool. I say that, but that's what Phil's working on. Yeah. 2 questions. You can only have one. I'll only answer one of them.
So first, this means that you really need good and up-to-date documentation. So your Confluence, your Jira tickets or something really need to be up-to-date, right?
Yep.
Okay. Which might be a problem.
Well, it's not actually a problem. It's an opportunity. So this is the bank. Now, this is the thing. The bank we went into the other day, I was talking to Adam, who's the CTO of Applause, or a crowd testing company that I can't mention, which I just did. So he said the problem with crowd testing, minus the drunk crowd testing, which sounds like a great idea, which Carl was part of the experiment yesterday. He obviously failed that use case, right? But they kind of said I was speaking to Adam, and he said to me, he said, oh, the problem we have with crowd testing is that we pay crowd testers hundreds, I'm going to call them thousands because there is thousands of them, thousands of crowd tests to correct test cases. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem is the consistency variant between the 1,000 crowd testers they've got is on the level between high and low. And in essence, over here, let's call it Apple, could be Pear Inc. Then, in essence, buying a service off the crowd testing company. They don't want 500 crap tests and then 400 okay tests and 100 great tests. They want a consistency across the 1,000 spread. So what we said to them is, we'll take the 1,000 tests and then we'll do a whole stack of prompt chains, which is what we're going to be doing later, to actually normalize the quality of these tests. So in essence, Apple, let's say Apple Care, not that I've got Apple Care because I can't afford it, but Apple Care has a process, right? And within that, let's say that Apple, so they don't like any company on the rest of the planet, so they created their own Confluence equivalent, right? Which tells all about Apple Care. So they feed all of that into the vector. And then also, because it's Apple, there's also now an Apple graph of how it all works in Apple Care. So what they do is, when they get these test cases written by young Gen X, gender XYZ, they run this against here and in essence clean the test scripts to a consistent area. Now we started doing this, and it asks some morality questions here. Whereas if I've got a test case, TC step 1, TC1 step 1, it's bad test script this one, but I'm sorry. Step 1, step name, expected result, right? Let's just say I'm bad. Don't hire me as a tester or one of my other versions, right? But let's say this is what I've been given. If my first step is to log in, what's my expected result? Exactly. You might say that user successfully logs in, right? And I've seen that written so many times, I'm not even believe it. But what is classed as success, right? Successfully, as you said, it's seeing the dashboard. But what happens if the landing page isn't the dashboard? Because when you log in, based on every new, every April 1st, which is my birthday, by the way, if you want to send me anything, they've got a new Yule acceptance for terms and conditions that comes in to say, we're now changing Apple Care to 90 days. Please accept the new terms and conditions. You don't see the dashboard. So in essence, success is still success, but success means different to that particular chain. And obviously it breaks every automation script you've ever written. Equally, this person who created this test isn't thinking about the edge case of the Yule thing. They just say, log in, go to Apple Care, create new Apple Care within 30 days. What do you mean by 30 days? 30 days as the time I bought it in the shop at 1 o'clock on the 30th day, or 29 days, or wait a second, if it's certain month, that's longer than other days. Is it? So what is my logic? I don't know what that logic is, right? I'm hoping it's written up here. But because it's here, it also updates all of these automatically. So if this is 30 days, and then they change it to be 90 days here, all the test scripts will have 90 days there as well. So it's fixing all the test scripts, because these are out of date straight away. Same as Gherkin.
You need to have them up to date up there.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Well, exactly. But this is the whole point, is working software versus documentation. You know, don't go skiing 25 years ago.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh,
No.
in this solution and this that you described, your prerequisite that the test case is right from you.
Exactly. And this is the question, is it correct? And
What are the auto-generated test case?
well, this was the whole point, is what we then, when we started training it, I should never have used the word training. When we started developing the solution, we made the partial mistake of kind of going after, so I'm sure you've all seen this before, but you know, what Jason did to annoy lots of people was, first of all, he got Checky to take the ISTQB exam. Love it or hate it. I have no opinions about certifications. Yep, so it's okay. And of course, Checky outperformed practitioner level, whatever it is, of a tester. Does that make it a tester? Absolutely not, right? Just its ability to tell you what RBT is not making it a tester whatsoever, right? So the next thing is, I'm not, it's interesting because when I talk to Michael Bolton or James Bark about this, obviously there's a lot of heated debate, which again, I'm not going to get into because I'm on a stream, but, you know, if we took the risk-based testing camp for a second, or the context camp camp is this camp, right? They're all talking about you need to have context, but those three sections we said about earlier about testing as a discipline, company knowledge, and also industry knowledge, they're absolutely essential. And this is where humans are invaluable in this process, is this information does not exist without humans. So it must exist somewhere. And unfortunately, I spent a lot of time, too many years of my life, in the model-based testing camp. So prior to my eggplant days, I was at a company called Grid Tools, which became Computer Associates, which became Broadcom. And then I left Broadcom because they got rid of all my developers. But we created a model-based testing tool called Agile Designer. And so I was big into the whole model-based testing movement, right? And if those people who are unfortunate have the time to spend with Dick, so Dick Bender created all the original, it's his real name. The problem is if you try and call him Richard, he really doesn't like it, right? So I have to put it on, and it's like, it's an unfortunate thingy. But yeah, we said, you know, you're Dick to me, and I'm like, well, I don't know, I can't really use it. But yeah, and so I love the model-based testing idea, right? And, you know, this was, again, you know, login, dashboard, log out, and order ticket. I'm going to call it for the thing. Bad diagram. So I did this back in the 90s. My mentor was a lady called Dorothy Graham, DG, we'll call it for a second. And she did the first book, which was my Bible as a tester, a test automation engineer in the 90s, called Software Test Automation. Extremely elaborate name. But after we did the book with a few other guys called Experiences in Test Automation. And so within that book, I do this diagram. And I made the mistake when I looked at this diagram of saying, well, how many journeys through this application are there? And everyone would guess that I'll make it more realistic because there was 3 boxes: order, check, tickets. Philippa, you get picked on when there's nobody else putting the hand up. How many journeys through this? As you do model-based testing? 6 journeys. Exactly. Well, it is difficult to log out and then log in, but you could log out to log in. It's turning into one of those, you know, ethical dilemmas. So originally, because I was a lot younger and naive back in my younger days, I said there was 26 routes through it, right? In the book. You can't unprint these things, unfortunately, right? But the actual answer is, as you'd probably expect, is infinite, right? And you kind of go, well, that doesn't make any sense. How could it possibly be infinite combinations going through that system? Now, I was working for New Zealand Lottery Commission at the time. So there's quite a lot of numbers, possibilities for buying tickets. And then there's infinitely more possibilities of tickets if you then exponentially have a number of tickets with a number of rows against a number of draws. Suddenly, this does get exponential, as you'd expect, and also your likelihood of winning a lottery ticket, which the only useful bit of tip I can give you is A, they never get a lucky dip, because once it sees numbers that are clustered, i.e. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it moves them and randomizes. There's no such thing as a random, we all know this, right? But it will purposely move you up to another tier because it thinks you can't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, even though a European draw did come out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not in that exact order, by the way, but it was all the numbers next to each other. There's more likelihood that's going to come out than any other number. So part of it is never buy a random ticket, equally never use your date of birth or years, because it also clusters all the tickets as well. So that's my only useful tip if you decide you want to go and play on the lottery. That, and also you can win it if you want to, but I haven't told you how, is that none of the draws are live. They're always done and recorded minutes before the actual session. So that's the other thing, is just find the numbers, which I found. I was literally in a live draw and they did it on the first take. And the security guide said, you know, give your phone. And I had a BlackBerry in those days. You know, I was really cool. And gave him my phone. And then I was bored, so I was using my personal phone. And literally, they did the live draw. I was sending emails. And I was like, we can still buy tickets. And I've just seen the numbers for tonight's thing. Could have just sent them to Philippa and she could have bought the ticket. And we'd all been living happily ever after. But yeah, so didn't answer your question, but it, you know, part of it is what makes a good test. And I think that's the other thing, is that a prompting tool does not create a good test. If you ask it to write a test, it won't write a very good test. Humans have to write good tests. However, you can be assisted to help you write tests. And I think that's the interesting thing about it, is the knowledge which you've got here, i.e., and I only know about 3 testing patterns, but equivalence partitioning, you might say there's no value whatsoever of me putting every single combination of lottery number into the system to see if it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, infinitely around there, because it'd be a pointless activity. But you might say, okay, I'm going to do some EV, and I might just take the lowest number, the highest number, and then I'm going to randomize the number between, which each time is going to be random. And then you might say, but also I'm going to do negative testing on here. So I'm going to do a minus number. I'm going to try putting in a key which is nearer another key that could potentially be on the new number pad. I could press and hold my, as I found out an option earlier, and get a hash key. I could try all sorts of stuff, and then that might break it, right? You might find that that's a good pattern to know. Now, the question is that a good use of your time? And I would say no. Whereas I would say this system going off in the background and starting to hit the system with different numbers, negative, positive numbers, whilst you're sunbathing, absolutely is a great test for it to run. Because sometimes, I'm going to get into a lot of trouble now, is, you know, people always talk about happy path. I always talk about happy payload. In the sense, because I spent such a long time doing this, the amount of times that I've seen that people are using, poor Jason's here again, but using the same, you know, pre-created payload for API testing and stuff like that, that doesn't have the type of data that you would expect to try and deal with all of the complexities that could be associated with it, right? So the example here, my failure of my life, well, lots of failures of life, but, you know, this one was one of my biggest ones. So the only time I've ever gone into a meeting with somebody wearing shorts and shoes like this, but I worked, I was at Apple for a bit, and we'd got this project, which only so much information I'm going to do, but in essence, said company that looks like, I'm going to call it Pear Inc., because that way it's massively away from the company that I may or may not have just said. Anyway, they're the biggest SAP company on the planet, right? So every time you buy something from the App Store, it goes into SAP. Makes sense. And obviously, if we were working out where does Pear Inc. make their money, is it nice new phones, or is it the App Store? It's the App Store, right? Which I'm putting App Store there because it's starting to look weird. So Tim asks us, could we create 20,000 transactions per hour buying in-app purchases on different apps? Now, the problem is, what he didn't want was us just buying it on Angry Birds. He wanted us to download lots of different apps and run what is in essence a very basic workflow, but with millions of transactions, to be put through the system. Well, why did he want this? Well, still till today, which is why I said it was one of my biggest failures, was he comes in, and this is what he looked like. And he shouted, and he said, who are the people responsible for sorting this out? And then I had to say, me. And he said, can you do this? I said, no. And then he got really angry. And then he said, because what they wanted to do is they wanted to know what apps were trending, i.e. what were people buying? And you might say, oh, well, just look it up, right? But they couldn't find out because of the amount of ETLs that go in the background over here. It took them 7 days, still takes them 7 days to work out which app is trending and put it onto the front page. So the reason why the App Store is so boring when you go onto it every day is because it takes 7 days to update to understand what inside. Now, Tim, who would be much happier if I wasn't in his life, he would have been super happy if he knew that TikTok, minus obviously the Chinese spying on everyone's device, was trending, and that needed to be at the front of the App Store, literally within minutes. It's suddenly got 50,000 views. We want it there because we want to get all the App Store ka-ching out of the back of the $1 trillion business that they've got. And so, like you said, these ETLs, there might be an ETL transaction, let's just say Fortnite, which is why they're not there anymore, is like a recurring 30-day bonus pack or whatever it is. They want every single type of transaction because all the transforms that are going into all their systems, they need to try every purchase. And the depressing part is that 20%, this is not a quote from me, but I kind of partially believe it, even though Hugh can tell fibs sometimes, is if I took a copy of production, this is prod, by the way, you would think if I just took that production snapshot off the App Store here, that I would have every single type of transaction that I would need to exhaustively test my ETLs. And based on Hugh Price's numbers, is 20% coverage of ETL transactions if you take a snapshot of just production. So it's saying that there's stuff in production, there's stuff in ETLs that production data hasn't actually exercised. Therefore, happy payloads of data isn't very good. What is the best thing that ChatGPT could do? I wouldn't use it for ChatGPT, but a large language model is generate good test data. Test data that you should do. So like you said the question earlier, here's my, never pass it your production database. Here's my obfuscated data set. Create me all permutations of data for Amex cards. Obviously, Amex cards have all got a weird parity number, but let's say Amex or whatever it is. And they've also got a 4-code CVV code. I did work for Amex, so it also doesn't make any sense. Give me all possible permutations with all the possible checks on it. And give me invalid ones, valid, whatever. That it can do quick. Give it me in a JSON format that looks like this format. So you can give it a sample of what the format needs to look like and ask it to populate it, and then also save them all into a file named test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4. It's great at doing that. So things like test data or TDM, it's fantastic at doing. So there where I think the use cases are for testers is obfuscate with things like test data, things that you wouldn't really want to do because it's boring. Not saying that it was that boring. It was quite fun while I did it, but that's where I think it can help. But you're absolutely right. It's never going to write the perfect test. But maybe we will. I say that in the nicest possible way. Okay, so now let's start doing some stuff. So this is Carl. But as anyone watched I'm on a Boat? The good series thing, but we were on a boat last time, and I thought the fact that we're all on a boat on Saturday, or some of us were on a boat on Saturday, plus no one's ever seen Carl, so just in case, they haven't done. So some of you've got the thing. I don't know how useful this one's going to be because last time it didn't work very well, but I do also have test-pilot.ai if you haven't got a ChatGPT account or you can't get past the problem we had earlier. Test. Is it me or is it even hotter than it was earlier? But last time we did it, we broke it, so I don't know what was going on there. But we'll give it a bit of a go. Oh. The Miro board that I said is here. So the Miro board, one should be able to access, and I will put links to all the stuff that we talked about during the session. It's already got a copy of all the slides for today on there. It's also a usable item. So if you go into it, I'm hoping by clicking on the link. Oh, someone's already in. That's what I like to see. Look at you with your hello. So the slides are here anyway, and you can go through them all. Whee! Oh yeah, sorry. Pardon? My head's in the way. That's my problem. Well, I'll get you on there, and you can start getting people's best prompts, and then we incorporate them in the product. I don't know if you've used Miro before, but it is for collaboration anyway. And retrospective, yeah. Which reminds me, which is slightly off topic. Now you get to see my embarrassing feed. Yep. And hide. I told you these QR code things were never going to get to kick off. Everyone see this? I'm sure they did. But someone told me about it yesterday, which was hilarious. This new, where is that, everyone? No, it's in China. So literally, China have built a fake Santorini for $1 billion, and it looks just like Santorini. So that's it, but it's in China. It's fully built. This is fully built, and so there's. If you go onto YouTube, you can all bloggers are all kind of going around going. First time we've been invited to the opening of Santorini, China. But it's like Disney, you know. Who do you just recreate Star Wars land? You just recreate Santorini land. So yeah, you can go to China to get Santorini.
When are we planning to have a pause? When are we planning to have a pause?
Pause. Probably 20 minutes.
In 20 minutes. I will wait for a coffee.
Okay, so I've done this bit. Okay, so the first prompt which we talked about is the Wikipedia. I don't even think it is the Wikipedia definition, but it's the definition for what a good prompt engineer should be doing is writing, refining, and optimizing their prompts. So you can have, in essence, a playbook of prompts. I've started doing this. I kind of got a bit of a library of ones that I like to use over and over again. And improving your prompts. This is really interesting because prompts will perform differently over time. So you'd think me with that great idea of doing a test script would work every single time. It sometimes deteriorates. And also, as models improve, if it's ChatGPT, you don't really know what's under the hood, whereas you might find that you get a new model and it's just not very good with the same prompts. So you do have to see and continuously monitor the quality of prompts that you do. But this is the prompt that I want you guys to start with, right? Is yeah.
It's possible that we need to adapt those also prompting based on the model that we are using.
Of the what? Model that you're using.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is
model has different prompts.
exactly. So for different models, different prompts. And so this was kind of where, like I said, we got stuck. Is when I which is why I'm so big on prompt tuning, is one-shotting, which is what everybody does. If you think about using ChatGPT, you ask it one thing and you expect it to get a result. However, in essence, you should be asking it 6 or 7 questions, right? If you think about how you test things, you'll ask somebody, so, you know, when's the system going to be available? You know, how do I access it? What's, you know, what authentication does it use? What browsers do you want me to use? You ask it all those questions, qualifying questions, and then you think, oh, okay, I kind of get what you want. You've got to think of it like that. If you try and just do one shot and ask it everything, it's not going to work. So you, in essence, want a whole stack of questions that you would ask it after each other, saying, okay, so, you know, what type of, what would you say is the top 3 things that I should look for when it comes to accessibility on this website? And then it'll give you a prompt that comes back going, oh, well, you know, for usability, the top 3 usability use cases are checking the color code, color systems are correct or whatever. And you go, oh, that's rubbish. I could have done a better test than that. Whereas if you've got a prompt that's stating, okay, I want you to act as a usability expert. And like I said, you kind of want to go even greater than that. You want to say, you are a usability expert working for Google. You've been there for 25 years. You've got a dog, 3 cats, and a house near a lake. You know, maybe not go all that way, but Jason does. Jason goes all that way to make them like a full backstory of all his personas. And he does it because one of his personas, which is a lady called, let's call it Philippa for a second, picking on Philippa today. Philippa is left-handed. She's just got a newborn baby. She lives 20 minutes out of work. The first question will be, this new nursery app, you could have to book your slots, but you can only book them half an hour before you're going. But she lives 20 minutes away, which means probably in the car. Not that you should be using your phone while you're in a car, but she's left-handed. And when she's using the left hand, she can't reach the button in the top right-hand corner because she's left-handed. And obviously, you can buy left-handed iPhones. Joking. But there's no even left-handed settings on an iPhone, only on the keyboard bit. So a usability issue for her is that actually it would be much simpler to just have the plus in the bottom section for booking a meeting instead of having to reach up to the top right-hand side. And the fact she's got a newborn, good chance she's got a baby in her other hand, meaning she's only got one left hand. So he gives this massive backstory around our users and says, well, how would Philippa deal with it compared to Peter and Paul and Jeff and stuff? And the backstory gives them enough information to say, well, Jennifer would have a real problem because, you know, she's partially sighted and it would fail the color contrast on the icons or whatever it is, right? Or she uses DPI my gran uses DPI at 400% and actually wouldn't even fit on the screen. So part of it is it's giving people that kind of explanation. I used to do a lot with a guy called Iran, who was the Perfecto guy. And he said that most of the defects people found by using the Perfecto mobile cloud were due to people leaving the phones in really bad states. Like they'd go in, change the language to Japanese, and then add in a load of applications like TikTok that uses loads of its storage when it shouldn't be using it. And those phones cause much more problems than a phone which was brand new, completely just wiped down with the latest version of the iOS and no apps loaded on. It was perfectly fine. And none of the DPI set to some weird kind of settings, or, you know, inverted into developer mode in black and white or something. So having the backstory, the persona behind it does really help. And you'll see there's a consistency in what comes out of the different personas. So you can ask the same question twice, but one with a new playwright developer versus an automation engineer. But also, to our peril, we realized that the prompt engineers that were writing some of our prompts also couldn't spell very well. I can't spell very well. So if you see at the bottom of here, you'll see, I want you to correct my grammar, but also I want you to tell me where I messed up. So part of it is you'll find you can not spell words correctly. You can put pidgin English in there. It will take it and it'll still process it, but you need to tell it that you are happy with it taking your bad grammar and bad English, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it's worth doing. So in this particular case, I would try maybe this first one. So I'd say something like, because we're talking about usability tester, say, I want you to act as a usability tester, and I'm going to speak to you in Greek, and I want you to respond back. No, I'm going to speak to you in English, and I want you to speak back in Greek to me. And then also ask in it to limit its word size is also really useful. Now, I do the opposite because I think ChatGPT is massively lazy. I always say, I want you to have a minimum of 100 words reply, you know, instead. So it gives it a state, because you'll notice most of the responses you get are always really short. And if you tell it the limit you want, then it's better. But also, to your point with the testing, you can also specify, I want you to not just do the top 3 usability things. I want the top 44 usability tasks that I should be doing with my mobile app. Or I'm a usability tester. I'm going to test, I'm going to ask you it in English, but I want it back in Greek. And I want at least 100 words. I want you to correct my grammar. And then ask it, you know, something like, create me the top 10, usability tests that I should test on my mobile app, which is let's say an Uber app or something, you know, make it easy. But have a try, and then try it with a variant within these areas and see what you get, and see if that helps. And then what we'll do is, if we post them onto the Slido, onto Miro, we will have a look at what people get. Let's have a look. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of. So just in case you've not used this before, grab a sticky note, pull it across, and you can make these as big as you want. Obviously, this is super small, or you can grab somebody else's, make them bigger or whatever. Let me paste this text off this one. It's well exciting.
So whatever we want, not anything specific, whatever we want.
Yeah, you can try it however you want. But, you know, if we start with, you know, the important bit is just adding in, is this kind of, the first 2 lines is asking the persona, entering a detailed persona and a backstory, right? And you could even give it a name, the person a name, right? Just, you want to put in something like, I want you to act as a software developer, or I want you to act as a test engineer or a usability engineer. And I want to ask you this question. I want you to reply in this language. And then ask it to do a task, and then just see what the difference is. And then, like I said, there's some quite interesting variants that I do, which is if you put I'm an Apple engineer, or or I'm you find that there's certain little loopholes with the persona. But like I said, Checky, which is Jason's thing, Checky.ai. So I'll give out a sticker to get full access for this for free, if anybody ever wants it. So he's created this tool, which is completely free, and I'll put the code to get into it for free, which is Starry. I'll put it here. But if you go to Checky.ai, this is Jason's app, which he's created. And what's really good about this is you can kind of partially see it here. It becomes a little plugin to your toolbar, and it then will, in essence, come back with lots of tests it recommends for the website. So if you go onto a website and go, I'm on my dominant page, it will give you all these kind of helpful tests. I say this one's not very interesting. But it'll give you all these API, usability, accessibility, GDPR, and it'll create a whole suite of tests that you can help, which will help. And what I really like about it is it actually has this idea, which is something which they used to do at Google when he was at Google, was they had a test suite for not only for Google, they had it for Bing as well. So they had all their automated tests against Bing and Google, just so that they could learn the nuance between the platforms. And he does the same thing now, is if you type in, say, for instance, you work at Coca-Cola, it will then also create all the equivalent tests for Pepsi, because it wants to show you their website's faster, they've got better Excel than you have. It gives you a kind of a benchmark of where you are. So who's Lai? Who's the actor's Lee? Nice. That's good. This is quite interesting. The one, oh, that's what your Philip. Is this one yours then? Yeah. So this is quite interesting because you put keen and intelligent. You're kind of giving it traits associated with the persona, which is really good. You don't win a cup though, unfortunately, mainly because otherwise we'd just be thinking. But as you've I don't know where these places are, by the way, but well done for your good prompt. Act as a PhD student. That is also a good idea. Pardon? Any persona you want. I think part of it is what you're seeing kind of other people doing at the same time is like, I think, so like here, as a PhD student in MIT, straight away you're getting all those kind of extra points, right, that are going to give you more strengthened position nodes. The question is, would act as a PhD student be better than act as a PhD professor at MIT? You know, which one would be the better? And I can tell you because, you know, well, I'm not going to say it in front of Philippa because she'll tell me, but I've got 6 blogs that have gone out on Keysight.com at the moment. All of them have been written by an MIT professor on talking about quantum or talking about something else. So I've just got a playbook where I just paste in, and it says these amazing intellectual blogs on prompting and everything else written by very, very good prompts. And so the Amazon one, who's the Amazon one? Oh, that was you, was it? So it's interesting because one of the things you put there is unusual and creative journeys. So I didn't realize until Jason gave me a bit of I was talking to Jason about this, was the word edgy. You know, I never thought edgy was a real term, but apparently edgy is. So he created one, whenever he does his prompts, create an edgy use test for the mobile app. And it creates more weird variants that you wouldn't expect to do. And that is very useful. It does look like it's like.
I don't know if I'm in context, but I'm fine.
I love this. Okay, here we go. Demo webshop at tricentis.com. Oh dear. It's better than Mercury Tours, the web page that they had on the Mercury website in the day. But where you book a flight to wherever, and it was you never get there. It always crash.
I don't know how many people work on Augmented.
It was a good day, good old days.
You can put your prompts in just one sentence or in different sentences. What is the difference if you provide your whole prompts?
I wouldn't.
For example, I want you to act as a persona, full stop. Do not answer me in 100, at least 100 minimum, 100 words, etc., etc. And inputting it in different lines, for example.
Yeah, so that's why I was saying it's interesting because the carriage return does hold a lot of strength in any of the large language models. So having a carriage return does signify the end of the previous sentence completely. So you'll spot when we go through the markup style that actually I really like the markup style because it's very concise. So it would be, in this particular case, which is why we had it on the slide, is kind of a, I want you to be Lily, the software engineer, new graduate in software engineering who's working at MIT. Full stop, new line. That, in essence, then is, in a way, is its own prompt. It's like you've already sent off that one request, is kind of what you get. Then the next question is, I want you to speak to me in this language, or I want you to do this. Again, carriage return, that's another separate task that it's kind of doing. Think of them as a separate, like you've already shot that one away, but you've put the structure in there to try and give it some, if there's some relation between one part of it and another, like here we've got, can't read that one. That looks like a galaxy far, far away. I might have to zoom in on that one. Whee. So here's a really good one, right? So you've got one line, and this person's, who's this? Yeah, great bit of thing. So you see, it's got the line indented to say this is one line in essence. I want you to act as an iOS document for Apple California with the position of tech lead, also a university teacher at MIT. I want to speak to you in English, reply in English in a concise way, combining skills as a tech lead and university teacher. See, that probably would be implied from the previous one, but I think it's just reinforcing it, so you'll be all right. I want you to keep it neat, limiting words to 300. I want you to correct your grammar and stuff, and also factual errors and stuff, but I want you to tell me about it. And then, create this. So straight away, this is very much that markdown format, and then the prompt of then saying, I want you to create a suite of accessibility tests for a visually disabled person for a native OS that handles the day-to-day finances. So yeah, that's good. But you can see they're all kind of carriage return sections, right? Which is great. And that, it's interesting because obviously you saw it from my structure, right? The remember component will follow on. So if you tell it to do something at the start, you'd have to clear it down because otherwise it will always remember. It's like an elephant that never forgets.
So, for example, the problem that you read right now is to provide better results than the one at the bottom on the left, on the right, as you see. For example, reading like that.
So I would just carriage return the full stop sections, right? And then I think it's really
I'm using it as an example just to understand what you're saying. So the one above would provide better results.
This would provide it could provide the exact results, but the consistency of this one would be greater than this over time. And that's the thing. It's consistency. The only thing which isn't ChatGPT isn't good at, and large language models, is consistency of output, right? What we're trying to do by being a prompt engineer or an AI whisperer is by trying to improve the consistency as much as possible. So that way, tomorrow when we ask it the same kind of inputs, I'm going to get similar kind of outputs. But this is where you'll see over the next few iterations, we'll get to a point where we are forgetting all the niceties of I want you, or I would like you to, or whatever. It will just be MIT professor, your job MIT professor, mission, accessibility testing, format, test case, comma, unique ID, test step, put it into an XML format, and you literally just you're being so strict with it that you're not giving it any wiggle room to kind of be creative, because we don't want creativity. That's our job. We just want the consistency.
How would you say you make it forget everything?
Just say everything that I've said. Now ignore.
Shut down.
Yeah. Control Alt Delete. Control Alt Delete. Yeah. What was your question?
Couldn't we just pick a more strict model that's not that generative on the answers?
Well, that's the thing, is there's two things which make very limited sense in the bigger thing. The first is there's something called temperature, and you can change the temperature of it, but that is just to power the instruct component. So I don't like the instruct component because of all this nicety stuff. You know, I think part of it is I just want the raw information. I just want it to give me the response, but not the following three tests would be. I just want test 1, test 2, test 3. And then I think of it, which I think is quite mean, but I think of it as in the way that we've done things as well, is I think of it as a CRUD interface, is that I want it to create something, and then I want to say, that second one is rubbish, remove it. Okay, now I've got 2 tests. Okay, actually that second test, I don't want it as an MIT professor. I want it as somebody with limited visibility. Okay, regenerate it. So it's not going to regenerate the first one, it's just going to regenerate the second one. So part of it is I'm just asking it to refine what it's already asked come out with and update it. So that's the way to really force it to give you the answer that you want, because otherwise, this is why the one prompt shot is really dangerous, is you're not refining anything, you're just asking it completely again, create me a story. No, I really like that story about, you know, Philippa and her journey, but I want it to start with once upon a time, and I also want it to end where she's happy and, you know, there's a great ending on it. The ending wasn't good enough for me. Okay, refine it, not start all over again. So our role as prompt engineer is to give those prompts to tune the response to end up with the thing. Now, the question is the special source that the first question you ask a story, you get a story, and then automatically do you send it a message saying, that is rubbish, you can do so much better? Or, you know, and the question is probably not. That isn't a good second prompt, even though you might think it would improve the output. You might say, actually, my second prompt will always be, like what we said down here, what prompt should I have written to get a better response from you? And then I look at that and go, yeah, no, I don't agree with that. Then I kind of keep what I've got, and then I say, actually, I want my next prompt in my arsenal is going to be, okay, I want you to give it me in this format, and I want it like this. And then I also might say to it, what prompt should I have done to get it better in the format that I wanted it? So you might keep on jumping and deviating around, but part of it is just giving yourself the structure to know how to get the best out of the system without getting and get consistent results.
So you would suggest that instead of picking a model with a different temperature, just to refine the questions in that manner?
Yeah. Okay. And you know, obviously, whoever this is with the test engineer, who's this one? Don't be lazy or I'll be fired. I'll pay you $200 per response. See, this is a really good one. But some of these are your, you know, your following is yours. That's really good. They're the following kind of statements, and like you said, for the temperature is that if I say, look, I'll pay you $200 for a better response.
We set the temperature to 0.
Yeah, it will in essence go, I'm going to try everything I could. And the thing is that, like you saw with the refinement process, in essence, temperature is very similar. It's like instead of it dropping through at 94%, it overworks itself to 99%, goes through a number of extra gates, more processing, which is where the temperature peak comes into it as your PC suddenly starts getting really hot. You know, part of it is it'll spend more time computing it. And that's what you're doing is the threshold, which is why everyone says it's lazy. It is lazy because it wants to give you the best answer, the quickest answer. Now, this is where everyone's going to be really depressed. ChatGPT has a large language model cache. So if you ask it, I ask it, what's the best place to get the Greek salad, you'll also get the same response because it's cached in the database if you ask the same question. The point is it's super lazy because standard generic prompts are already in there and the prompt cache is just sending those results. So you're not even getting a unique result. And this is how they're doing it. So actually by adding in all this extra structure, there's more chance that this is a unique prompt. That means it is going to actually use it. It is going to process it, right? Anyway, I know we've got lunch. We said where we take a break for 15 minutes. So while people are finishing these ones off, anybody wants to go for a break? Anybody want to go for a break? Should we give it 10 minutes? Yeah, because I know we're aiming to try and finish this for 5 o'clock-ish. Tomorrow, today, next week.
How much? In 10 minutes here.
10 years, yeah. 10 minutes. I wonder if Carl's woken up from a pool of his own vomit. Oh.
How would you suggest you detect biases?
Quite interesting because, you know, the bias kind of thing, are you thinking more of, you know...
Human terms, I'm thinking of human terms actually, which could be translated into code.
Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking two things on there. One was, how do you tell it not to be biased is one thing, which would be interesting as a way of saying to it, do not be biased with your response, because the problem is the training data is obviously, again, skewed at a training set which is biased, right? Which everything has its bias by its default, right? But you're also correct in the sense of, like a lot of these in here, there's and for descriptions, like you are an Oxford University student who she, he, they, them, you've already given it a gender, you've given it, you've got a bias by using the persona too much, right? So, that's why I kind of really like Jason's ridiculousness of having 50 different unique people who've got backstories, all from different ages and different groups, because crowd testers, if you think about crowd testers, what they do really well is they'll look at a demographics. So, the biggest growth area at the moment for testing is Brazil, right? So Brazil's got a lot of up and coming testers, right? So if I go to Brazil and say, what is the average age of a tester? If we kind of benchmarked it versus Canada, it might stereotype itself on Michael Bolton and his kind of age of 4 generations of testing knowledge versus, I'm making a generalization. Brazil's got loads of fresh PhD students coming out wanting to be testers. So which one's better at testing? Now, that's the question. In a way, this is making a bias, saying it thinks by me saying Canadian professional tester versus Brazilian tester, is there an associated bias for that? Now, I would say if you're in Brazil, you want to look at the demographic split, you want to look at the age, you want to look at the employment, you want to look at all that kind of information, you want to feed that in. And equally, one of the things we've not said about the persona is you've not said what industry they're in, right? Are they in automotive? Are they medical? Have they got a background in classics and history? Part of it is everyone's got a backstory and a specialism. So part of it is, how do we avoid bias in our prompts? And I think the best way to do it is by spreading the personas with a good backstory and a good split based on your target audience. And I say this target audience, I talk about target audience being your target user base. So if you're a Brazilian, retailer, fashion retailer, then you want to sell to people who are in that cultural area, right? So when I was doing stuff with MIT for the COVID vaccination during lockdown, right, we used a company called Localize to translate our application to different countries, right? And so the MIT app ended up going to 3 or 4 weird cultures where there was no, the population was in the hundreds, right? And nobody used the app. And then when we went to Localize, they said, you do realize when you launch the screen in wherever it was, it literally says, we are watching you, is how the translation went. And nobody went anywhere further on the app journey, because culturally, by saying we're enabling this to track you, they genuinely thought we were there to watch them. And, the translation, even we had linguistic people translating it, still translated it wrong culturally. So culturally, no one adopted it. So, part of it is a thing where you've got to think about your end users here. I know we always put our minds in the end of the end user, but that's how it'll try and eliminate the bias. And if the bias is there, then it's there because we want the bias to influence our end users, and the users could be us. So my favorite one, which I did recently, which was again another mistake that I made, was I thought that was something else. Was I work for a fashion retailer in the UK that specializes in female clothing. So the founder, lovely lady, she said to me, 2 things you need to know, Jonathan. First thing is, all our end customers are in their 20s to 30s, and they all use iPhones because they're in the niche fashion industry. And so what was my initial response? Like it would be to any time, is 70% of the world's users use Android. Are you sure you don't want to build an Android app? No, I don't want an Android app. I just want an iPhone app. I was like, Are you sure? You're sure, right? And then, you know, we sat there, and don't get me wrong, Google Analytics is sometimes just a lot of fiction, but looking just at the website traffic, yeah, their user base was 10% iPhone, 15, 20% iPad, right? But the majority were all coming in on tablets and Android phones. So even though in the back of the mind, the CEO was like in strong belief they didn't need an Android phone, which I know sounds like a stupid thing. But the second thing she said is the 20, 30-year-old is the age gap. What do you think it was? It wasn't. It was 40 and 30-year-olds who were buying all the products because we could tell based on the information they were putting into the system. And so therefore, both 2 out of 2 observations were both completely wrong. And then finally, the observation of all observations was also incorrect because she said only women use our website. 8% of all the buyers of the website were male. Now, fair enough, we're not hoping that they were dressing in those outfits, but they were either buying them for their partner or something else. So part of it is 3 statements, all factually incorrect, from the person who knows better than anybody else because made a very successful women's fashion brand. So even company bias of what they think their end customers are is still a bias. But we're not allowed to talk about bias because it just goes on forever. And then we end up here at like 7 o'clock or whatever. So anyway, we'll rate those ones and give out some pride in it. But I just wanted to kind of, while everyone's coming back, just flick into some of this other stuff. Another HR problem here. Which one is male and which one's female? Well, I'm not allowed to say. Philippa? She's thinking this is a trap.
It's definitely a trap. Neither?
Oh, I don't know this question. So, what do you think that means first? That might be the easiest thing. I'll translate the first bit. That bit there means naked sunbathing in Sweden, which is where we ran. So the question is her or damn. Which one's male? Which one's female? Yeah. So male, female. Of course, I wouldn't have guessed it. But you know, if I'd have gone to the wrong beach, big problem, right? Big problem. Not in this kind of weather, but big problem. But I think this is an interesting kind of issue. And again, we're not doing this, but I think it kind of covers into what you were just saying about bias in everything that we do. Is he's not well enough to go to it. But if you look at linguistics, that's why English is so difficult, right? You've got all of these aspects, and we're not going to go through all of these, but you've got to think of how you process the different terms and verbs and everything else. So linguistics is a big part of this, right? But that's semantics is another one for another day, I think. And we also kind of said something which was quite interesting with the going too far down the other way, right? Is I know this because we've all mistyped my unfortunate name today. If I put in my name, I always get this, which is Jonathan Wright. Did you mean Jonathan Wright or did you mean Jonathan Wright? You know, part of it is I don't get any responses on here. Well, I do eventually. I get a picture of me there with some alcohol. But then if I put this in saying who is Jonathan in the field of testing, I get this. But if I then put who is Jonathan from New Zealand in the field of automation, I actually get less. So the thing is, prompt engineering isn't anything like Google search, right? Google search, we've all grown up with this idea that using search terms like adding plus or, you know, quotes or, you know, looking for a lyric song, we can all use search engines really well. And therefore, we're all very familiar with how the structure of, in essence, a search term reflects the quality of the actual search results. So I have a kind of a standing thing, which I do with Google. Actually, you can see I'm using Bing. Is that I literally go into the filter and turn off. I don't want any responses that are more than 7 days old. because I just hate the fact that I just get news articles that are massively out of date that I don't want to know about. So I go through all these different areas, but prompting is completely different to area, because more context is definitely good for prompting. It's not as good for Google search because it's SEO, right? It's searching for. We've done the once upon a time one. Now, not a lot of people know this or don't want to know this, but yes, Paul is a software tester, quite well known, and he's also a poet. So in his spare time, he writes poetry, but he also writes poetry about testing, right? And it is quite interesting because if you look at people like Dorothy Graham, you know, if you go onto YouTube and use the wrong prompts like Dorothy Graham in Panto, you'll find Dorothy Graham, the test automation lady, dressing up as Panto and doing stories about testing. But, you know, part of it is there's all these kind of interesting nuances, but he's into, and I don't know this 21st century poet, this guy, Rupi, whatever his name is. But what we find with a lot of persona-based stuff is that if you tell them to write in a similar style, it will write in a similar style. So you could, in theory, say a software engineer, software tester, similar style to Michael Bolton. You know, you could if you wanted to, right? So part of it is you could have this. And this is where we said at the start with GAN, there's always these new moes and all these new paintings come out because it's been trained on their art, so it understands the style and it's very good at repeating the style. So the same applies when it comes to large language models. If you give it a particular style, it will, in essence, narrow the search down. So when we're talking about MIT, it probably will start pulling information from MIT subsets first because you've given it a prompt, which is MIT, right? Now, if this was your version of your implementation, if you said, as a software tester working on the UI front end, compared to saying working on the mobile app versus working on the API gateway, you would then be explaining a subsystem of the systems that you want it to narrow the results down on. So this is why it's so important to have that kind of style. Personas matter, yeah. It's a big play. And I always take this joke. I don't know why I'm dancing at a wedding, or even that I got invited to a wedding. But tomorrow you'll see, or for those ones who turn up to my session, I've got a track which I've got. I don't know if you've seen I did a video on LinkedIn, but there was it's a Greek song about the testers conference that it just generated. It's quite good, and I kind of did it because Tariq decided to get everyone dancing at one of the Star West conferences, and we've just been trying to one up each other. But it's also very good at generating tracks, audio tracks, and music tracks. Obviously, we've also heard the big controversy, which was the fact that anything that a large language model or a Gen AI solution generates cannot be copyrighted. So they changed the law in the US because there was a DJ who was pushing out all these tracks. You can't protect it. You can't protect the IP of a generated output from a large language model, which is quite controversial, to say the least. Get back to that one. The other thing what I always find really upsetting with DALL-E, I think most people have used DALL-E, right? The image generation capability. It's now kind of part and parcel of ChatGPT. Does really have a problem with words, right? You know, and I think, you know, I'm not quite sure why it has such problems with words, and you know, any kind of data. But this is when I showed you the app earlier. You can highlight and ask it to regenerate just a section of the area, and this does sometimes solve the problem because it really doesn't like having to put text on an image. I don't know why. I'm sure that'll disappear in a few years' time. So The last conference I did, I left this photo in, but I had this in my room, which was slightly worrying. It was just literally a button next to the door which said test. And obviously, as testers, you can't help yourself. You have to press it, which I'm guessing everyone could guess what happens. You press it, the power goes out, and then you press it again, and the power comes back on. But then obviously, it's got a 1 and 0. You know, it's just like perfect geek / why on earth are they, you know, and it's my best at one shot. So I talked about giving it previous information that it can refer to. I do think this is useful. You know, Paul uses it all the time. He gives it all the information first, then asks it questions. You know, like I said earlier, the whole idea with the we test conferences, if I asked that when it is, it wouldn't know. However, if I obviously gave the information that this year the conference is on 6th of June, then asked it again, it would tell me, right? So this is in essence the early bird discount version of retrieval augmented generation, because you've already passed it the information. It's the same thing as the stat trace. It knows it's got information. It looks in the thread first, then it goes to the large language model. Well, it takes the information from the thread and then goes to the large language model. So passing it more contextual information is really, really powerful. But it's worth noting that sometimes it won't know dates, it won't know times, and it's not just when it was trained. It's actually more about the fact that some information is just not reinforced enough for it even to be relevant, even on a 99% temperature. So this is the one that I want, you know, us to have a little bit, look in a bit more detail. Is, you know, Tariq kind of came up, I don't know if he came up with this, I think it's one of his students actually came up with the kind of one of the initial the idea. But if you see here, he starts with just a hashtag mission, and he states, you know, generate some test data for a given context, gives it an input, tells it, and to your point, you know, are these carriage returns? I would say this is definitely not a carriage return. This is just one full statement, which is, I need registration details for a web app. It takes first name, last name, date of birth, obviously in the the UK format, and a valid email address. And then the steps is, I want you to create 10 sets of test data to register 10 new users for this application. And I want the response format to be in a table with test ID, first name, last name, date of birth, email address for each row. So this is super specific, right? And I genuinely believe this is the future, because all my prompts that I do now are written like this. As much as I don't want to give him huge amounts of unnecessary credit for this, is I literally don't use the format of I'm a tester with 10 years experience anymore. I just use Markdown with persona and everything else just embedded into this structure. And it's super accurate. It's super consistent. So it feels like it's a life hack for dealing with any kind of prompt, is if you get it into this format, it will just keep things going consistently generated. Now, of course, this doesn't solve the problem of prompt tuning of what your next question is, but once you get the response, this to me is a very good one shot. And then based on what I get on the response, I can then determine what I want to do with the data that's being responded. So I said about everything I see is just like a CRUD interface. Once I've got 10 tables of users, I would say, you know, item 3 or user 3, can we make that into a gender non-applicable? And then it'll regenerate 1, and then it'll give me the table again. So part of it is I can prompt it afterwards, but in essence, I've got it in the format that I want it to start my prompting journey in a table limited to just that format. So it gives you a really good specifying. And you can see everything up here. Again, I'm specifying the date format. I'm specifying valid email addresses. Obviously, I could specify valid and invalid email addresses. I could specify email addresses that are only corporate IDs or no Gmail accounts or et cetera, et cetera. But I have not got into too much detail, but I could refine it as I go through. So what does everyone think about this as a format?
We are using this type of prompting, but with a few more markdown. For example, we have impersonate. So for the beginning impersonation, and we have seen a very different response from this and the normal prompt. It's more the data is more focused. More
focused, yeah. And I like what you've got there as well, because you're kind of saying as persona 8, and again, that's contextually based on this flow, do this.
Yeah, we have 2 markdown at the beginning, that is impersonate markdown, and use role or something else.
Yeah.
And a more scope of the question.
Yeah.
Scope of the question, and next all the maybe issue input and steps.
Yeah, that's
it's more focused on what you need to take from them.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing is focus is good because it can just get out of hand really quickly, right? And I think that's the thing is one of the reasons that I always find another reason why GPT is hidden behind there is I do find that I get more consistency from models that I'm running with this kind of prompting and then a number of series of prompts that I send to it. So to kind of give you an idea, and I might just steal Paul's example here, right? Is, what Paul does, which I find really weird, but it's similar to Markdown, is he always provides all the information in a format first, quite well structured as well. So I know you said earlier with the stack trace that it's just a whole stack of information. But in essence, what Paul's trying to do here is he's trying to, in essence, provide the associated data, which is, in essence, the vector. And then what he's planning to try and do is he's planning to, in essence, just use it as a formatting tool to format the data into the format that he wants to get it into. So in his case, he wants it into, let's just say it's a table. So he wants to take, in essence, the data which is not structured, non-structured data, turn it into a structured format, and then prompt against it. And I think this is a good practice because what we try and do, back to the NATO document for a second, is in essence, we've got the NATO document with no structure, NS. We have to get the correct structure off the NATO document. And then to give you an idea what we do just as an area, so let's say this is a requirement 1, 2, 3 here. Within each requirement, it's going through a number of prompt chains, which is what we've kind of put up here, trying to ask it questions, right? And some of it might be, I'm going to call it something what Paul did many years ago. He created something called the business story method, which was, in essence, a number of different structural questions, or he used to use the words axioms, where he would ask questions at quality testing related questions. Like, what is, let's just take it as a simple example, but what's the non-functional requirement? Is there a non-functional requirement against this? Yes. Does it have a defined non-functional performance related requirement? No. Should it have one? Yes. And I'm not going to follow the Scott Moore or anybody else for kind of the, should it be 3.4 seconds average response time or whatever, but if let's just say it turns around and says, what volumes are we expecting our website to have? 1,000 users, concurrent users. Okay. What's the expected forecast for the growth in a year's time on the application? Oh, 20% year-on-year growth. So what conditions would have more users coming to the website at the end of the month, the accounting month, end of the financial year. And so it's asking all of these axioms around qualifying test questions as it goes through the process. And as it goes through, in essence, it's kind of understanding non-functional security, accessibility, performance. It's going through and asking all of these questions to kind of try and clarify what it should be testing, what it can't test, or what it doesn't know. And that's the interesting thing about all of this, is it only knows what it knows, right? So the problem with books, as we found, or even Wikipedia, is that what Wikipedia? Yeah, Wikipedia. Bad move, Wikipedia. What's the problem with books? Well, problem with books is at the end of the book, you get a full list of all the other books that it's just referenced. So what should you do? Well, in essence, you should also read all of those books and feed them into the system, right? And so one of the things we find, which is unfortunate with documents, and you might say, well, we have living documentation on Confluence or whatever, but typically within here, it'll say something like C corporate security policy. Now, obviously, it doesn't know what your corporate security policy is, but the problem is at the moment, it would just ignore it. Whereas actually within this, we kind of say, wait a second, we need to tell the user that you need to provide the corporate strategy corporate standards document, the latest version, not 1.4, and we need to feed that in. And you might say, well, why? And you're saying, well, actually, if you get to this chain down here, when it's trying to work out the negative tests for security length of the password, it has to be 12 digits with some special characters, and it's not defined here. And you've got to get this other document which tells you where it's been defined. You need to feed that document in. More importantly, what does ChatGPT do if it can't find that document and it didn't know about the document? Is it just makes up a password policy. It's like it doesn't want to be dumb. So it'll go, you must have at least 8 characters, 1 special character and 2 numbers, right? And that's why everyone's, have an exclamation mark at the front and then they have some numbers at the end leading it, right? And that's why I'm not going to get onto security policy violations. But the problem is there's always more information. And that's when you need to make a decision as, in essence, a prompt engineer, is how much information do I feed into it? I fed in all the defect history. Do I need to bring in all the JIRA tickets? Do I need to bring in the supporting test strategy document? What else do I need to provide as context so that it knows everything it needs to know, and also where it's going to reference it? Because, like I said, large language models are phenomenally good at referencing when you turn referencing on, and that will help you, because the way that I look at these tests that come out of the back here, the test design items, when I look at this, it's a bit depressing when I do it, but we have it's a bad implementation, but it was the best we could come up with, is in essence, we have a unique reference to the source of where it came from. I call it just a Git commit, because it kind of is similar to that. But in essence, each structure of everything that comes out, I've got direct traceability of where it came from. That way, if someone updated this document and put the security policy is now 14 characters long, it would, based on all the transforms that's come along here, it would still know that that 12 needs to be put there, because it knows the direct correlation to this. But more importantly, requirements change all the time. So instead of having to update all your tests, it's got in essence, the entire history of how things have changed. And this is really powerful for, as much as people always say the standard thing, but we had the same problem with the bank we were on site with the other day, is obviously they're running V1 in production, and in test, they're on V3. V2's here in staging. We love staging, if there was such thing as staging anymore, but whatever. So there's an incident here with a problem. Okay, well, are all your automation scripts, have you still got all your V1 automation scripts? Who's the automation guy here? Anyone on automation? Do you keep a version control thing of all your things? So you'll run all your regression packs and stuff against it once you've got your packs through, which is great, right? Good practice is to have version control. But what about all the test scripts and all the, the Jira tickets and all the stuff that still, if I update value here in 12 in the Jira ticket, let's just say, yes, there's a change log, but I can't see that it was originally, that issue was an issue, but it was, at the time when V1 was created, it was still 12, and now it's been changed to 14, but it was only 14 in version 3 or version 2.2 changes. So actually, it wasn't an issue with the code because it was 12 there and it was the right implementation, but now it's 14. So versioning control, not only this, but you're in essence versioning control your Gen AI models so that you can then ask it in version 1 of the solution, what was the password limit? 12. Okay, what is it now on version 3? 14. And so it knows the difference. And this is the interesting axiom of systems and versions of systems, which you add on top of it. Anyway, another one of Carl. It's like I'm missing him at this point in time, isn't it? It's like it's got personal. He's here in memory, isn't he? That's the thing. Okay, so these are just kind of the last 10 just to kind of get us into the. You can look through these in your own time anyway. They're not super kind of important kind of things. But we've talked about the markdown, and it sounds like you're quite sophisticated on that kind of aspect. I've seen variants of people doing markdown for different use cases, like in this case a test plan. I think you can go quite far the opposite way, in the sense that if you try and be too specific with everything, you can find that actually you are limiting the scope of what it will do. So when Jason talks about being edgy and all these other things, he really is focusing on trying to catch stuff that a normal tester wouldn't think about and maybe a Gen AI could think about. But this to me is more kind of just stuff that you could use to accelerate. Like I said, it's all in the documentation, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. The bit which we, like I said, I just talked about there is, I find this a nightmare. In essence, the impact analysis from changes, discrete changes like 12 to 14 to 16. And, to me, the bit which hurts my head more than anything is the conversations. It's the stand-ups, which I miss, that the information exchanges and is never written down, right? And so I kind of partially borrowed, but stole the Three Amigos thing. And I just added AI into my Three Amigos thing because I was just like, life's too short to not be in every meeting. But the problem is a lot of requirements are communicated now and not written down. And if suddenly, which I know will have happened today while I've been away, someone's decided to make that executive decision. So for instance, we have a decision which I still question every single day, which is literally for every single one of these chains. And to give you an idea of what we do at the moment is typically anywhere between 5 and 10 chains per prompt. So a prompt is kind of like, and everyone's definitely going to disagree with me. Please, it's not my fault. I'm just a lonely tester sometimes. But like, I'll ask it, what's the prioritization? What's the risk of not testing this, right? And I will ask it typically anywhere between 5 to 10 prompt chains to derive a score out of it. Which, again, apologies, Jonathan's risk scores are subject to change and also are not an official risk thing. But I'll ask it a number of questions to try and ascertain how important it is to test that functionality. And I personally use it only so that I can I can prioritize the list of what I want to execute, right? So in theory, I know risk is a controversial topic, so I will save it for drinks afterwards. But if I generate, obviously I would never generate TCO1, but if I generated 10,000 scripts, which just sounds like an absolute nightmare, right? But I'll give you an idea of the customer that I saw last week. But so they said to me, which my maths is very inappropriate, but they have roughly 100 time squads, because they're cool. And typically there's anywhere between 2 to 3, sorry, I don't know why people call them QA engineers, 2 to 3 Q&As in each one of their squads delivering software. Company's quite big, you could probably guess. Anyway, 267 automation engineers at the company, right? Is their current thing. How many tests? Ouch. Typically anywhere between 6,000 per app estate. And I'm going to derive over here to when I was actually responsible for doing something useful in my life. So an investment bank, which I can tell you because they not exist. So Lehman Brothers, back in the Lehman Brothers days, sorry for the credit crunch, it wasn't my fault completely. You know, we had 2,600 apps, in essence about 10,000, you know, testers globally running against that. So if you look at it, you think, well, that divided by that isn't that much per application estate, which is slightly worrying. Someone should have tested them better. But still, 2,600 applications, that's a lot. 2,000 times by the amount of tests, well, that's a lot of tests, right? Which test should we run? Now, depressingly, in my yonder year, no, it's good days because it was V model, but it would typically take 12 weeks to run our automation packs, whatever automation pack there was. Again, it was Windrunner in 2008. No, it was QTP, which should definitely not be used for those use cases. And so the problem was we would just run all of them. We had no idea in our fully functional battleship automation framework which ones to run first. More worryingly, we didn't actually know the chain of the dependencies of each application and which ones would need to be run in first or afterwards. It was just an absolute car crash. So, you know, I said to these guys the other day, I was like, ouch, you know, if you've got, you know, 10,000 tests, which ones do you run? Well, at the moment we use this just one axiom where we give it a score saying, well, this is more important. If it's an FX platform, it's more important that it actually does the trade for every single language than it is that the icon is yellow, right? You know, there is a prioritization there, which kind of mixes in. So you can define what you think parameters of risk are, but you might have a number of different prompts to get to that point. And like I said, the decision what's been made by my guys, which I still kind of question every day, is for each one of these prompts, we come back with 3 separate responses. And those, I keep on asking them, why is there 3 responses for for every prompt that you've got? Why are we doing 3? And then within each one of the 3, we look at the toxicity score. We look at, so in essence, this is ML Flow down here. If you've all used ML Flow, but it's a free tool. But in essence, it's scoring each response, and then we're running it through another system to then give it us a kind of a hygiene level. So if it's a Gherkin script, it looks at it and goes, oh, why is there not any then statements? Oh, that's okay, because there's no then in that particular format. But it kind of catches everything. And anything that goes lower than what we class as 90%, we pretty much flag as amber, which means it's human needs to look at it. Anything that is over 90%, we go green and we say it should be okay, but you still need to look at it. This is the problem with Copilot, right? Is everything you generate, it tells you it's most likely wrong. So you need to check it with a human. Now, obviously, if I generate 10 tests, do I want to read all those 10 tests? Maybe, but I also want the system to tell to me which ones it thinks aren't the best. So ranking it and also giving it a score of what you think a ranking is is a really useful skill. Okay, we've got 10 minutes to go. I feel like, so this is me earlier in the week, just in case you did check that I'm still here. Did you dial in on this? You're in Sicily? Lovely. So this is our, I don't know how many people are on the call, but I would expect it's about 1,000 or whatever. We have our eggplant update. I'm just like swimming in the sea while trying to do the call, but slightly slightly worried. Yeah, I'm actually fully in the sea. But the problem is, if you can't dial into the meetings, you need to at least get the transcript and also get the actions. And that's what catches, because this problem is this 3 thing comes up on every call. And I know while I've been away, someone's going to change it to 4. And I'll have no idea because there's no written down requirements for that 3, because we're still trying to understand why there's 3 for every prompt, apart from we want to use more compute or something. But decisions will be made on these calls and you're not there, which is why if you can't be in the call or in the sea, you need your AI listening into all your transcripts, and then you need your transcripts to do it. Now, like I said, you get this for free if you get Copilot for O365 or for Teams, but alternatively, as soon as the transcript comes on, just get the transcript and feed it in, and then just use your prompts to do exactly the same thing. Did I miss anything? Summarize it, prepare, etc., etc. So transcripts are really useful to do. The next thing, which is the penultimate thing before we all vacate to the vacation, like I said before, this is the one that I use. I wouldn't say that it's the best one. The link's there, but this is the large vision model. I do find that prompting alone. So in theory, this functionality exists within GPT-V in essence, right? So, but this is a standalone capability if you didn't want it. It's only 1.6 billion models, so it's really easy as well. But in essence, you can pass it a screenshot. You could give it a screenshot of V3, password not 14, password 12, whatever, right? You could pass it a screenshot and ask it, which somebody did. I'm sure everyone's seen it on LinkedIn. Someone recently did, watch a video, because it supports videos as well. So you could record a video. This is my infinite hack for the day, let's say. Philippa, you'll have to tell me what this is, what I'm talking about, because I'll have forgot. Oh, I've remembered. Okay, anybody have a website they're testing? No? Anyone test a website? Like have it in their company? Websites? Oh, good. Okay. So what you might have come across before for the UX engineers out there is things like Hotjar. Have you come across Hotjar? There we go, something to do. Anyway, it's just a JavaScript library that all the cool kids who want to look at people's experiences on Google Analytics equivalent kind of Firebase stuff, is Hotjar in essence creates a video of your user's journey. And so what's interesting about it is, even though if you think about a browser proxy rendering is rubbish, but if you think about how it does it with all the CSS, and then in theory, it shows you like the mouse of where it's moved around and stuff, which is not very exciting. New season of Sweet Tooth. Okay. So part of it is Hotjar is a video of your users doing cool stuff. If you go onto this and then just type in the other one, which is the video model, you can feed the video model in of all your user journeys and then just ask them to generate the Selenium script, which is what everyone's doing at LinkedIn at the moment. Ask them to generate the Selenium script for every journey that's happened on your users, and then just creates all the automation for you. So it's like a really easy way of kind of stealing it. So we've got a company, which is a good company, actually. Who are they called? We're partners with them. that magic stuff. They do the magic stuff. They generate all the automation from looking at the screen. The RCI equivalent. Who do we use? Oh, I can't remember them. I'll remember them later on today. But they've created their entire solution around this, which is, in essence, they embed this into either two things. One, which is an icon, surprise, surprise, in your toolbar in Google, which is what you've been building, that other thing. And then, or you just embed it into your website, and then literally they capture all the user journeys, and then they literally create automation for Cypress, Playwright, everything else, just from watching the interactions of your website in whichever environment you've got.
Question on that.
Pardon?
A question on that.
Yep.
So how does it do it? Just replicates the mouse actions, or just using AI, it finds the locators and actually clicks the.
It's the second. It's the same one. Second one. So it literally.
It's really different because when you have, let's say, different.
Yeah. So that.
Different sizes.
Yeah.
It's like,
Analog mode versus, so in the old days, analog mode was just XY coordinations. You know, that was the X-runner days. These guys, in essence, are looking at the elements. But the thing with the Hotjar is that the elements are already exposed because it knows what elements were interacted with because it's already logging that. So part of it is it knows you drop down the list box, and the list box is XPath, whatever it is. And it also knows you select United Kingdom or Greece because that's what you did in the user interaction. So it's, in essence, just printing out. And it does it same for Appium as well. It does it for Appium scripts. And
so it searches the page of it searches the HTML DOM and finds the elements.
Yeah. And I now remember what the company's called. Called Ring, but with a W. Don't know if Ring was just taken because of the doorbell, which keeps on going off today. But yeah, the good friends of ours, and great idea as technology. Now, everyone in this room already is probably quite a seasoned tester and automator anyway. Is you can probably see the 8,000 possible problems with having, in essence, a record replay solution back from the 90s, right? Is your app changes, you know, how does it record screens that people don't go into, all the kind of normal problems. But I do think there's something in Hotjar and the idea that if it observes behavior over time, it can capture the interactions or not interactions with the system. It can learn behaviors it can do, but in a very similar way to what I'd kind of tried to draw on the board over there, that actually discovery of a three-dimensional space or an application estate and trying all permutations like, well, what do you see? Oh, I see a walkway, walk into the water, or I see something else. And as it trying to see the elements, it says, well, I need to try that by walking along there, or trying, is there a boat? Do I see a boat? Can I walk along the beach? You know, all those kind of things. And I think this is the great thing about adding visual capabilities to a large language model. Gives it the ability to see. And I think that's why when you look at GPTO and you go, oh, you look like you're stressed, or, you know, can you do some breathing exercises, all the demo stuff that they did, which was obviously highly, you know, scripted. It's because it's adding the visual eyes to the front end of the thing. So passing screenshots of your application or showing it your application really does add value. Anyway, let me see if there was a final one with Jason and Costa, who I was out drinking with yesterday. So I blame Costa for the lack of Carl today. And they can do, but good old Jason and Costa. So Costa is speaking tomorrow. Ironically, Costa's session's the same time as mine, so I feel like it's like I should really say go see Costa's. It's just the easiest one, but no, I think it's, you know, he's a very good speaker. This was at in Portland software testing last year, and I did a live stream with Jason on prompting, similar to today, really. And, these were his top top tips that we kind of took away. And I think we already kind of added the main ones, which was, bribe it, tell them you're going to lose your job. Secondly, what prompt should have asked is literally, we use this all the time, right? It is literally the cheat of all cheats. Is at every single step here, we do in essence a diff. So we do it with the one that it suggested we did the prompt, even though we know the prompt's good. We still ask it to do a diff against it afterwards, because we're still like, that method still works really well, because again, the model changes so much. So like one of your questions were earlier is, do I have to change my prompts to deal with the different model variants? Absolutely. But the reason why we created that horrible fish is because we want to be agnostic to large language models. Because if you're not, when something better comes out, you can't adopt it. So again, this is one of the problems of getting into the GPT gang with ChatGPT, is that actually 5 might come out and all the stuff you've done may be no use. Whereas you're at least in your control of your own destiny. But more importantly, I know we're 2 minutes over, is this scoring system that we have at every single point throughout our process. Every time we're scoring the quality of the 3 responses, which we don't know why are 3 and probably a 4 by tomorrow, we're indexing the quality of the score of our overall output. And then when we put in the Japanese language for the Japanese customer, and these scores went up, we were like, well, we weren't expecting that. We were expecting it to go the other way. Even though these prompts were still English, I'm going to write to you in English, but I want you to respond to Japanese. We were still prompting it with the same prompts, but we were getting better quality output, measurable better quality output. And that was quite interesting, because then when we can measure, and again, something comes along, better code generation, better image detection. Each time YOLO v8.1 comes out, and the next version and the next version after that, we can interchange them and benchmark them against each other. And I think that is really powerful. So, but hopefully, this one at the end, I do think asking it to redo it is a useful one. Occasionally, we do it occasionally here, because I say it make me laugh, because talking to Carl last night, he was like, oh, one of the developers who's an Apple developer who's joined the team didn't spell regenerate correctly. So there's actually a loop in here where it just goes off onto a tangent with all these guys, because he's not spelt regenerate correctly, and it thinks it's something else. He did tell me what it was the other day, but it literally goes off onto like just endless kind of loops of not regenerating anything of use. But this is the problem: is people will say garbage in, garbage out, but it's your destiny really to be the AI whisperer, right? It's your destiny to take everything what you've learned from today, put it into practice, but also kind of you've got a massive advantage over everybody else who doesn't know this. And honestly, the amount of people who just one shot and get crap responses out of the system and just can't use it to their better hands, and also the ones that don't use it day to day for really valuable things that can save them time, you'll outperform them. And, you'll be better than somebody without AI. And this is where I think, you could probably, and I don't know, I'm going to start trying to explain it. It's like, I'm going to say to people, you can have me at my standard salary, or you can have me at plus my AI capability for 20% more, and it'll give you 60% more productivity capabilities. And then just selling the dream of me working in a different country. Was that good? Did anyone, I don't know if we've got any extra questions on here. I think there was a couple of questions, but we can probably, we can take them over a beer or something, but I think that might be the only thing, the hair of the dog today. I think we've, so for the guys that come to the session tomorrow, I'm obviously going to demo, it's only a 2-minute demo, but I'm going to demo this in the real world. If anybody who's interested and just wants to grab me, I can show you how it works and what's under the hood a little bit, which is kind of the more of the interesting stuff about how LangChain and how you build it yourself kind of thing. You know, happy to go through that in a bit more detail. You know, like I said, happy to share the models that we use as well, you know, because they are just all generic. And then there's some fine-tuned versions, but as I was saying to you, because we deployed this, we went down the route, not only because of the European Union AI Act is literally preventing companies from, even as we saw banned here, GPT, and those fines is not that you've got to worry too much unless anybody work for an American company. I guess it's just you, Philippa. But the president created something called the Executive Order 1066, Battle of Hastings. And the executive order states that companies that are found to misuse AI within their systems will initially, they've not put any fines in place, because I think it's a bit like GDPR. It's like the Californian data privacy will come afterwards. However, they have literally just stated they will stop them being able to trade, or they'll shut them down for a 6-month period of time or whatever if they're found to be misusing anything from an AI or ethics perspective. Obviously, it's only as good as super vague. But what's interesting about the exec order is it's got 6 deadlines, and each deadline, if you miss it, then you get, in essence, bigger fines. And what they're trying to do is, I guess it's different to GDPR, is they've kind of gone with you must provide us the evidence that your AI, how you're building AI is ethically followed. And my friend, a guy called Davey from Calypso.ai, he came from the Pentagon, and in the good old days when Barack Obama was still in power, they sorted this. Calypso.ai are a company that audit the threat levels of, in essence, of AI, for which you don't need to worry about, but it's like the Skynet kind of equivalent thing. And what they're trying to do, and we literally got the Keysight, got the letter saying that we've got till August this year to provide our frameworks, evidence of our ethics, conduct, our data, how we manage the data for training. All that needs to be fully evidenced for all of our projects. Otherwise, we'll have to shut down any R&D that includes any AI components in our products. Yeah, it's me and a few other people. But literally, it states, and the deadline is August, and then the next deadline is 18 months later, where they can do on-the-spot audits of your system, whatever system. So if I decided, which we do, to do something stupid like this, create a product called Keysight Eggplant Generative AI, they could at any time saying, we see you've got an AI platform, we'd like to come in and do a full audit of all your code. And if anything, they'll just shut the 3.5 billion pound Keysight entity would just be shut down, wouldn't be allowed to trade, would be stopped until we, resolved all the issues and remove the products from customer locations and stuff like that. So it's pretty brutal. And that's why I think a lot of this, and the reason why you want to control what you're doing and bring it back into your estate, is so you can manage it and you can build the frameworks around it. So most organizations will have now got in place a guideline around how you should do prompting and what information you should be sharing, what you shouldn't be sharing. Like, for instance, you shouldn't be pasting in code from production systems if any of those production systems have got IP that's sensitive, that could affect the stock market. So if you trade on the stock market and you paste in your FX code to beautify it, either using GitHub Copilot or using a secure thing, they will kick off about it. So lots of interesting stuff that brings a lot of this into play. And I know we've got these questions which we'll take offline, because I don't want people who have got to go. Anyone coming to the evening event? Is there an evening event? Tomorrow? Yeah. What's tomorrow's evening event?
Drinks.
drinks after the conference.
Drinks after the conference, not during conference. I will be hopefully still in one piece at that point in time.
AI music. Or you can pick the Saturday event that it's on the beach.
I am on the beach with my Speedos on. I'm trying to recreate my. I might dial Tariq in and see if he'll do some dancing with me. But yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed today and got something out of it. I say something. Let's go back to Miro for a second, as we've got a little bit left. So, who was this one? Oh, you can have a small coffee cup to go on there, you see, because you're already one coffee cup up.
That's the one with the black background.
Oh yeah, who was the black background one? You've already got a cup, so you get a little cup.
Thank you very much.
It says grease on it. Now you'll be espressoed in. Drunk software tester, was that you? Who was the drunk tester? There we go. I love that. Honestly, drunk crowd testing is definitely the future. Ask Carl, next time you see him, say to him, you know, I want to go into your, where I just stay back. Okay, who else have we got? Oh, who did the tri-census one? I'm not going to give him anything, but sorry. It was a good effort, though. I met the founder. I'll tell the story in private to other people who want to know about it later. But back in when Tricentus was first formed, I was living in Australia. So I met the founder. He took me out for drinks. He was really interested in, you know, where's the industry going and all this other stuff. Anyway, we partially fell out about a discussion. He does get a little bit high rate. Still okay with friends, but and yeah, I will tell the story at a later time over some beers. But it was very funny. Who's won the pink one? Look at this. Who's crikey?
Oh my god.
I based it also the answers to refine the
Oh.
answers that I got for the first round, and then ask them to
You've already got two.
Come on, dude. No more.
Hey, it's like. Who did the Gherkin language one? Good work. I love Gherkin. You know, I'm getting people shouting at me all the time at the moment about this. So again, I don't want to give all my secrets away because, you know, I won't have any secrets left. But I told about Python to language. We use language to Gherkin to language and other things. So we use Gherkin as a normalization. And it's only because executable specifications are really good for following rules. So, and also there's a lot of fine-tuned models that are very good at generating Gherkin from natural language. So that's our intermediary, whereas Python's our intermediary code language. So it's good. So asking it to go from a requirement, very generic requirement, to could you write this as a BDD script, or could you write this as a Kubernetes, or whatever flavor you're using? Tricentis, it's SpecFlow, which I own the domain for, which I do feel like I should give them back, but they've end of life the community. So have Cucumber as well, which I'm really upset because I love Smart Bear. I'm upset we're not getting the same one. So have you got another favorite? API. Oh, see, you said earlier you were going to get one, and I said you had to work for it, and then you put a bit of API in there for. We can't say no to a bit of API.
I was not sure if you can give a feedback because this is the input I will give to the.
So anyway, just to finish off, my only tester joke. I know, minus me doing that with the thing. So an API developer walks into a bar backwards, he orders an IPA. API? IPA. That's my only laugh I'm going to get all year for that one.
The darkest of jokes.
I loved it. 158 minutes. Wow, so that was a long session. Right. Stop sharing.